Summary of The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Condensed books. About the author. Britt Bennett, an American writer, was born in Oceanside, California in 1990. She received her Master of Fine Arts from the University of Michigan after studying English philology at Stanford University. She also received training at Oxford and the University of Michigan. Bennett's literary talent had already been recognized during his university years, with some of his works receiving awards. Her first book, The Mothers, was published in 2016, and it became a New York Times bestseller. Other works by Bennett have seen the light of day since he began his narrative career, such as The Vanishing Half, which was named one of the best novels of 2020 by the New York Times. Overview. Britt Bennett's second novel, The Vanishing Half, was published in June 2020. It was named a Good Morning America Book Club pick and became a New York Times bestseller. The novel delves into the subject of female family bonds, as well as the African American experience. Bennett's debut novel, The Mothers, 2016, was also a New York Times bestseller and covered similar ground. HBO has acquired the film rights to The Vanishing Half to adapt the story into a limited television series. The novel is set in a variety of locations and periods. Between 1968 and the early 1980s, the story begins in the small village of Mallard, Louisiana, and then jumps to New Orleans, New York, Southern California, and back to Mallard. The limited third-person narrative point of view shifts among multiple people, just as the time and location shift among various places and decades. The story does not follow a linear path because it is driven by the characters' perceptions and recollections. Desiree and Stella Vignay, identical twins, leave their small Louisiana village at the age of 16 to seek their fortune in New Orleans. After 10 years, their lives have taken drastically different paths. Desiree has returned to Mallard after fleeing an abusive marriage to a black man with her daughter, whereas Stella is white, married to a businessman, and lives in California with her daughter. Desiree's search for her missing twin is detailed in the novel, as is Desiree's daughter's completion of the search. The book explores how identity is constructed, the role of self-loathing in creating an alternate persona, and the social ostracism experienced by those who are different from the norm in some way. Plot. Desiree and Stella Vignay, identical twins, live in a community of light-skinned black people in Mallard, Louisiana. The villagers are proud of their Caucasian features and coloring, with the majority of them passing for white. The Vignay sisters have lofty ambitions for their futures. Desiree aspires to be an actress, while Stella dreams of becoming a teacher. Their ambitions are dashed when their mother forces them to drop out of school at the age of 16 and work as maids to make ends meet. Desiree persuades Stella to flee to New Orleans in search of a better life in 1954. Desiree returns to Mallard 14 years later, accompanied by her dark-skinned daughter. They're trying to get away from Desiree's abusive husband. Meanwhile, Stella has abandoned Desiree to impersonate white. She married a wealthy businessman and moved to California with him and their daughter. Stella never tells anyone her true identity and does not attempt to contact her biological family. When Jude, Desiree's daughter, turns 18, she accepts a UCLA college scholarship and moves away from Mallard. She accidentally sees Stella and meets Stella's daughter, Kennedy, during her time in California. Jude develops a strong desire to confront her aunt. In the process, she forms an unlikely bond with Kennedy as the two contemplate the meaning of their kinship, even though they are opposites. Stella returns to Mallard to mend her broken relationship with her sister and mother as a result of Jude's interference. She returns to her white life in California after this reunion, and she never achieves a true sense of identity because her entire life is based on a fabrication. Chapter 1. Desiree and Stella Vignay were identical twins who grew up in the small rural village of Mallard, Louisiana, in the early 1950s. One of their forefathers founded Mallard to provide a haven for mixed-race people like himself. The town's inhabitants all have fair skin, light-colored eyes and straight hair. Any of them could be mistaken for a Caucasian in a heartbeat. The villagers, proud of their fair skin, look down on dark-skinned black people and anyone who marries one. Desiree and Stella will be forced to drop out of school at the age of 16 to help their mother make ends meet by working as housemaids. Desiree has always wanted to be an actress, while Stella has always wanted to teach school. In August 1954, the girls flee to New Orleans in search of a better future for themselves. Stella eventually vanishes, and Desiree relocates to Washington, D.C., where she works for the government analyzing fingerprints. She marries a dark-skinned black lawyer named Sam soon after. Sam begins to beat Desiree after a few years of marriage. Jude, their dark-skinned daughter, is the couple's only child. A different woman might have been disappointed by how little her daughter resembled her, Desiree believes, but she was only grateful. The last thing she wanted was to fall in love with someone who looked exactly like her. Desiree becomes convinced that Sam will kill her one day after he threatens her with a gun. Desiree returns to her mother's home in Mallard with Jude, despite a 14-year absence. Following Desiree's escape, Sam hires a bounty hunter to track her down so he can reclaim Jude. Early Jones is the one who accepts the job. When Seal slid him the photograph, Early's stomach lurched. He had spent time in Mallard years before, and Desiree had left a lasting impression on him. When Seal slid him the photograph, Early's stomach lurched. It was almost as if he'd willed it. He was staring at Desiree Vignay's face for the first time in 10 years. Chapter 2. Desiree remembers her father's assassination when she and Stella were children. 5 white men arrived at the Vignay residence and shot him. They went to the hospital and shot him again after he survived. Although Leon Vignay was illiterate, they claimed he had written a rude note to a white woman. His furniture business, in reality, was eating into the profits of the men who murdered him. "White folks kill you if you want too much, kill you if you want too little," someone says at the wake. "You must follow the rules, but they may change them as they see fit. If you ask me, it's devilish." Desiree enrolls Jude in school the morning after she arrives in Mallard, where the other students are taken aback by Jude's dark skin. Desiree's mother, Adele, chastises Desiree for not having a plan in place to support her child. Desiree travels to a nearby town to apply for a job as a fingerprint analyst with the police department, but she is turned down right away. Desiree enters the Surly Goat, a local dive, disgusted by her situation. As she sits drinking, she notices Early walk in and recognizes him right away. She remembers a summer when she was a teenager and Early used to deliver groceries to her house. He brought her small fruit gifts. Desiree was warned by Adele to avoid this dark-skinned boy from a sharecropper family. The couple didn't see each other for 14 years after their romance ended. When Desiree inquires about Early's whereabouts in Mallard, he casually replies that he's just passing through. Desiree shoves him away and storms out of the bar when he notices a bruise on her neck. When Early calls Sam later that evening, he lies and claims that he hasn't found Desiree yet. Chapter 3. Desiree recalls the early days in New Orleans when she and Stella struggled to make ends meet by working in a laundry, sleeping on floors and surviving on handouts. Stella landed a job as a secretary after passing for white for a few months. Desiree discovered Stella and all of her belongings had vanished without warning a year later. Her sister had left a note instructing her to go her own way. Desiree returns to Mallard in the present and works as a waitress at Lou's Egg House, serving a clientele that was once beneath her family's social status. As the months pass, she grows accustomed to small-town life, but the residents are concerned about Jude's dark skin, They weren't used to having a dark child amongst them and were surprised by how much it upset them. If there's nothing you can do about ugliness, at least make it appear as if you're trying to hide it. Early shows up at the restaurant one day and offers to assist Desiree in finding her sister. He admits that Sam hired him to track Desiree, but vows never to reveal that she is in Mallard. Early finds other work while Desiree considers hiring him to locate Stella. She eventually agrees to accompany him to New Orleans to follow up on her sister's trail, where an old friend claims she saw Stella on the arm of a white man years before. Back in Mallard, Adele reveals that Stella tried to pass herself off as white when she was a teenager. Desiree is taken aback because she had no idea. She considers the Passé Blanc, on the other hand, remained a mystery. You'd never meet one who had gone undetected, just as you'd never meet someone who had successfully faked her death. The act could only be successful if no one ever figured out it was a ruse. Early and Desiree discover an old Stella forwarding address in Boston. Early and Desiree fall in love before he leaves to follow up on this latest lead. Chapters 1 to 3 Analysis. The first segment takes place in 1968, but it tells Desiree and Stella's backstory, which begins with their fateful decision to run away from home in 1954. Because of the genetic anomalies of the residents of Mallard, all of whom would appear Caucasian to an outsider, skin tone becomes a prominent motif almost immediately. Mallard represents a closed-off world that protects those who are neither black nor white, but a mix of the two. Although the residents psychologically identify as Negroes, they maintain a subtle caste system within their ranks based on skin tone. Dark-skinned blacks are considered lower class than the town's light-skinned founders and descendants. In these chapters, skin color quickly becomes a source of social exclusion. The other villagers are suspicious of Desiree when she returns to Mallard with a dark-skinned child. Adele isn't fond of Jude, her only grandchild, because the girl is too dark to fit in with the Vigne family. Adele is presumably looking down on Desiree's husband, who is also dark-skinned like his daughter. Adele adheres to the village's traditional values, which state that light is preferable to darkness. When Early arrives looking for Desiree, she extends this judgment to him. He is doubly offensive to the Vigne matriarch because he is the dark-skinned offspring of a local sharecropper family. Stella has the opportunity to carve out a new identity as a white woman thanks to Mallard residents' skin color anomaly. Aside from the issue of racial passing, her decision to forge a new life for herself touches on the topic of identity. In every way, Stella and Desiree are the same people, but one chooses to return to an oppressive life in Mallard, while the other chooses to venture into the unknown in search of more opportunities. Chapter 4. Jude is on a bus bound for college in California 10 years later. She's relieved to be getting away from Mallard. Her mother repeatedly stated that she would leave, but she never did. Early, Desiree's boyfriend is the closest thing Jude has ever had to a father, though she still idealizes her real father, conveniently forgetting how many times he beat her mother. Jude has been teased by her classmates for her dark skin throughout her school years, a shadow lingering on the riverbank while the other children swam, a black dot in the school pictures, a dark speck on the pews at Sunday Mass. It was so dark that all you could see was her. Everything is contaminated by a fly in milk. Jude has only one passion: running. She was offered a scholarship to UCLA after winning gold medals at track meets, and she has no regrets about leaving her family behind. Desiree's life in Mallard has settled into a routine. Whenever he comes to town, Early stays with her. Adele will never accept Early as her daughter's boyfriend because of his sharecropper roots and dark skin. She treats him as if he were a handyman, telling him what needs to be fixed around the house. Desiree is apprehensive about getting married again and prefers to keep their relationship open-ended, but Early was easy. He didn't have any hidden sides. He couldn't trap her because he wouldn't let himself be trapped. Early hasn't been able to locate Stella. He could only follow her to a Boston address before losing track of her. It's too late. Even if she comes back, Desiree finally admits, she has already left. Early feels compelled to locate Desiree's missing twin, despite Desiree's protests. Chapter 5. Jude makes friends with Reese, a handsome white boy from Arkansas at UCLA. She finds out later that Reese used to be a girl named Therese, before deciding to change his gender identity. Reese had begun taking hormones to begin the process of transforming himself into a man by the time he arrived in Los Angeles. Jude accepts Reese's new persona and introduces her to his friends, many of whom moonlight as female impersonators in their spare time. Barry is a black transvestite who works as a chemistry teacher in a high school. Until he transforms into one of his flamboyant female personas, he appears perfectly ordinary. Jude's ultra-dark skin is accepted by everyone in Reese's clique because everyone has an alternate identity, even though she is acutely aware of how dark she is in comparison to other black people. Reese teaches Jude about his passion for photography, and Jude and Reese begin to spend all of their time together. Even though they aren't lovers, Reese persuades Jude to move into his apartment. Jude is perplexed by their relationship's nature. She likes Reese, but he hasn't made a romantic approach to her yet. She sees him emerge from the bathroom with his breasts tightly bound one day. He lashes out at her but later apologizes, explaining that he'll have his female breasts removed through surgery. Reese finally confesses his feelings for Jude during a citywide blackout, and the two make love. Chapter 6. Jude settles into his role as Reese's lover with ease. Reese doesn't want her touching his breasts because he hasn't had a sex change operation yet, and he insists on turning off all the lights when they make love. Jude herself is a little self-conscious about a handsome white boy hanging out with a black girl like her. She considers, although she was no longer in Mallard, the town refused to abandon her. She imagined sunbathers laughing as she yanked off her shirt even now at Venice Beach. I'm giggling at Reese as well, wondering what he's doing with that black thing. Reese's harsh upbringing in Arkansas, where his parents couldn't accept his gender identity, is discussed by Jude and Reese. After fleeing his home, Reese made a living as a prostitute in Los Angeles gay bars. He met Barry here, who offered him a meal and a place to crash until he could get his bearings. Reese is attracted to Jude and admires her intelligence, but she doesn't understand why he would want to be with her. Jude takes a side job as a caterer to help Reese, knowing that his meager savings will never cover the cost of his surgery. She gets the job thanks to Barry's brother, but she doesn't tell Reese why she needs the money. He might be too proud to accept her money. Jude is fascinated by the wealthy homes she visits during her various jobs, and Reese complains about how much time she spends working late. Jude strikes up a conversation with the teenage daughter of Hardison's successor while bartending at a retirement party for a man named Hardison. The girl is about the same age and attends a rival university, the University of Southern California. Even though her father received a big promotion as a result of Hardison's retirement, she complains that her mother couldn't be bothered to attend the party. The girl's mother enters the room wearing a fur coat, as if on cue. Jude accidentally spills a bottle of wine because she believes the woman is Stella. Chapters 4-6 Analysis. The story jumps 10 years forward in this set of chapters. Jude is now ready to begin college, and is relieved to be free of Mallard's prejudice. This segment describes Jude's ordeal as the town's only dark-skinned child in flashback. The daily abuse she has been subjected to has taken its toll on her mental health. Jude has internalized a negative view of herself at the age of 18, and she now projects that judgment outward to the world. This scene emphasizes the theme of self-judgment, which applies to both Jude and Reese. In a similar way to Jude, the latter has been shunned by his family and community. In Reese's case, intolerance has met his transgender identity, but in both cases, the fact that Reese and Jude are different from the people around them causes them to be perceived as threats to the status quo. When Reese first arrives in Los Angeles, he quickly makes friends with a group of homosexuals and transvestites. Jude is quickly accepted by the same group because everyone there knows what it's like to be an outsider. Although they have found a haven of acceptance, the couple continues to have abusive inner monologues. Jude chastises herself for dating a handsome white boy and believes that she is being judged for it. Reese, for one, projects his self-hatred onto Jude and refuses to let her see his female breasts. Reese thinks of himself as a freak, and he assumes Jude thinks the same of him. Reese and Jude's sense of self-identity is still shaped by negative reactions from people in their past. Neither of them has yet figured out how to develop an inner identity based on self-acceptance. Chapter 7. In 1968, the story shifts to Stella, just as Desiree is about to return to Mallard. Stella's fortunes, unlike those of her sister, are improving. She married a wealthy white man she met in New Orleans while working as his secretary. Blake Sanders comes from a wealthy family, and he has made a name for himself as a marketing expert in Los Angeles over the years. Sanders and his wife now have a daughter named Kennedy and live in Brentwood. When the homeowners in the subdivision learn that a colored family will be moving into the neighborhood, a crisis ensues. Stella stands up and delivers an impassioned speech to the group, emphasizing the importance of keeping the Negroes out. Her stance on the issue is praised by all. Blake finds it amusing that his normally calm wife gets so worked up. He considers. He couldn't understand why she averted her gaze when an elderly black woman shuffled by on the sidewalk, or why she was so rude to the elevator operators. She was jittery around black people, as if she'd been bitten by a dog. In reality, Stella is terrified of another black person seeing through her mask, and she lives in constant fear of her identity being revealed. The residents are unable to keep their neighborhoods white. Stella meets the wife while driving Kennedy to school shortly after the new family arrives. She casually greets the woman, but she is terrified of their encounter. She clenched her hands around the steering wheel the entire way to school, replaying the conversation in her mind. That woman's relaxed demeanor. What made her feel so at ease with Stella in the first place? Did she see something in her that she felt she could trust, even from across the street? Chapter 8. When Stella's new neighbor is revealed to be a minor celebrity, everyone in her neighborhood relaxes. Reginald Walker is a popular cop on television. Loretta, his wife, is attractive, and Cindy, their daughter, is well-behaved. The men seem to get along well with Reg, but the wives are wary of Loretta. Stella notices Kennedy has crossed the street to play with Cindy one day. She drags her daughter home terrified and tells her not to play with Cindy, using a racial slur in the process. Stella later bakes a lemon cake as a peace offering after feeling bad about snubbing her neighbor. Cindy and Kennedy should spend more time together, she suggests to Loretta. During their children's regular playdates, the two women eventually form a friendship. Loretta invites Stella over to play cards with some of her black female friends as their friendship grows. During the game, the topic of Cindy's education arises, as Loretta intends to send her daughter to a nearby white school. Friends are opposed to the decision. Stella agrees with them, claiming that it will be much more difficult for Cindy to attend a white school. Loretta finally gives in and sends Cindy to a black school where she will fit in. Loretta inquires about Stella's family on another occasion. The latter equivocates, but admits to having a twin sister. Stella is tempted to tell Loretta her entire life story. It was a humiliating but strangely liberating thought. Perhaps Stella could now tell her the entire story, and Loretta would understand. She didn't mean to betray anyone, she just needed to be different. Why couldn't she decide if she wanted a new life when it was her life? Chapter 9. Stella recalls how, after being fired from the laundry where she and her sister worked when they first arrived in New Orleans, she made the fateful decision to apply for a job as a secretary that required passing as white. Desiree encourages them to make the change because their savings are running out. Stella is enthralled by the prospect of passing. Being white wasn't the most exciting part, she says, tired of being seen as one half of a set of twins. The thrill was in pretending to be someone else. To change into a different person in plain sight, with no one around her noticing. She'd never felt so liberated before. Stella is assigned to work for Blake Sanders, the man who will become her future husband, after she gets the secretarial job. Stella soon finds herself dividing her identity between the white Miss Vignay and the black Stella, because he treats her with respect. She begins to notice the minor indignities she faces daily as a black woman without complaining. Stella eventually assumes the identity of Miss Vignay. Perhaps she wasn't a mask Stella put on. Miss Vignay might have already been a part of her, as if she had been split in two. She could transform into whichever woman she wanted, depending on which side of her face she exposed to the light. Her transformation is complete when Blake asks her to move to Boston with him. Back in the present, the Brentwood subdivision is in the midst of Christmas week. Stella and her husband are throwing a lavish holiday party, but the Walkers are not invited. Stella storms out of the party after some of the guests make crude jokes about how close she and Loretta have become. Blake confronts her later about their secret friendship and advises her to find a more productive way to deal with her loneliness. Bricks are thrown through the windows of the Walkers' house a few weeks later. The harassment will continue until they are compelled to leave. Stella fantasizes about telling Loretta her secret before the Walkers leave for good, but she never does. Chapters 7 to 9 Analysis. The story now shifts to Stella's life in 1968, just as Desiree is about to return to Mallard. The novel examines its main theme of identity construction now that the focus is squarely on Stella. Stella's transformation from a secretary impersonating a white woman in New Orleans to her current life as a high-maintenance white wife in California is charted for the reader. In terms of her identity, Stella's mind is torn. She feels like a liar and a cheat for betraying her biological family, but she also has contempt for the black people in her current environment. When a black family moves in across the street, her identity is put to the ultimate test. The idea of confessing her secret to her new neighbor Loretta appeals to Stella at the same time as it repels her. These chapters go into great detail about Stella's motivation. Apart from the obvious financial benefits, Stella appears to be even more compelled to adopt a false identity to shed her twin. Desiree is the dominant sibling, and everyone expects Stella to follow in Desiree's footsteps in terms of likes, dislikes, and life goals. Stella thinks it's a thrilling prospect to create a version of herself separate from her sister. In its depiction of the black family in Brentwood, this segment also highlights the theme of ostracism. Anything different poses a threat to the neighborhood's upper-class whites. They keep a cool demeanor around the Walkers at first, but Stella's friendship with Loretta suggests that they will eventually accept and assimilate the aliens in their midst. Stella's neighbors escalate their harassment as a result of this threat to the status quo until the colored family is forced to relocate. Stella is torn between two worlds as a result of her encounter. She's lost a friend and potential confidant, but she's kept her white identity safe. Chapter 10. Jude is in her senior year at UCLA in 1982. While working as a waitress in a Korean restaurant, she applied to medical school and is nervously waiting to hear if she has been accepted. She and Reese are still together, but they've downsized to a Koreatown apartment. Reese hasn't been able to come up with enough cash for his sex change business. Jude was fired from her catering job for spilling red wine on an expensive carpet on the night she thought she saw her aunt. Since then, she's been haunted by the possibility that the woman was Stella. Jude and Reese are given tickets to a play in which Barry performs in the chorus one night. After a long day at work, the two get dressed up and head to the theater. The play's leading lady is revealed to be the girl who could be Stella's daughter. Jude goes to great lengths to make friends with Kennedy Sanders. Her parents, she claims, despise the idea of her becoming an actress and would never come to see her perform. Jude is assisting Kennedy in putting on her costume one night when she begins questioning the girl about her mother. Jude claims to know Kennedy's mother because her family is from Louisiana. Kennedy mentions her mother's maiden name, Vignay, casually. Chapter 11. Stella's life had changed dramatically by 1988. Stella needed a diversion after Loretta moved away, and that diversion was continued education. She completed her GED, applied to colleges, and is now an adjunct mathematics professor at Santa Monica College. Stella is considering a graduate degree and a full professorship, despite Blake's reservations. Kennedy, on the other hand, is uninterested in academic achievement. She's been acting erratically since high school. Only a lazy girl would get caught, Stella believes, and her daughter was clever but lazy, blissfully unaware of how hard her mother worked to keep the lie that was her life alive. Stella makes a deal with her daughter, Kennedy, who has dropped out of college to pursue a career in the theater. If Kennedy agrees to return to college, she will attend a performance of Kennedy's play. But here in this world, her daughter